Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Michelle, your host and pocket DJ of Coffee Fueled Stories, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. This week's special guests are Lisa Morton and John Palisano, titans and kaiju of the horror industry. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hey,
Hi.
hi, thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
This
hi.
is
Thanks.
this is awesome. So I'm gonna kind of gush a little bit because check this out. Back in 2017, I had no idea what the Horror Writers Association was. I was newbie out of all of the newbies. I met John at the booth at the Festival of Books at USC in 2017, and he even took a silly picture with me, which I sent to him, and he remembered. So how cool is that? Thank you. And at the time, Lisa, you were the president of the HWA. And now, John, you became president. So literally, I have two awesome, awesome humans in the horror community on the show. So thank you so much. I had no idea that HWA would lead me to you guys right now in this moment.
Oh, that's awesome. It reminds me of that Ice Cube song, Ex-Presidents. I always think of that.
Awesome. So I, like I said, I had no. So this is a testament to the HWA. You never know where that being a member will lead you. So I will stop gushing now, and I will talk about your guys' awesome new book that you guys are here to talk about. And if I'm saying this incorrectly, please correct me. Is it Placerita?
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Lisa, would you like to give the listeners a little background about Placerita?
Yeah, it's our new novella that is coming out from Cemetery Dance in just a few more days at this point, that is co-authored by John and I. And, I think it started as a short story many, many years ago that John and I were invited into a collaborative anthology. And we had been talking, we both loved these legends, this urban legend in LA of lizard people who have this city beneath the streets of downtown LA where their tunnels are lined in gold. And this is a real urban legend. This is not something we created for this novella. And so we would talk about this at lunch and whatever. And when we were invited into this collaborative project, I think we both said, oh, let's do that urban legend in fiction form. And so we did a short story version, and that collaborative anthology ended up being huge and saying, you know what, can we bump you to another volume? And so we kind of put it off for a while. But then during lockdown back in 2020, I was looking for something that we could work on to expand. And I went back to that short story and I said, you know what, John, we could expand this into a full-length novella. What do you think? And he agreed. And it was so fun to, at that point, on a bigger canvas, look more at the history of LA, because the whole piece is set in 1928, when there was, again, a real life historical disaster, which was the failure of a local dam, the St. Francis Dam. And this thing broke in the early morning hours of 1928 one day and gushed a gigantic wall of water all the way from one of the inland canyons down to the sea, killed around 450 people. It's one of the worst disasters in U.S. history. It's weirdly forgotten in many ways now, which I find very perplexing, but we're setting it in 28. When we expanded it, it gave us a chance to include some incredible figures from LA history who were big then, like Amy Semple McPherson and William Mulholland, who was the architect of
Yes.
LA's water system. And so it was so fun to expand and to finish off that way.
So, how much research did you guys have to do? Or were you guys kind of already familiar with being both locals of LA? And was this something you guys had to spend a lot of time doing to research 1928 California?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, John actually is an East Coaster originally. I'm the LA native, so I did do quite a lot of research just to get some of those historical characters right. I mean, obviously, with the urban legend of the lizard people, there is some background, but you can certainly have fictitious fun with that. But I thought, like, Mulholland is such an odd and interesting character, and I wanted to do him justice. And the same thing with Amy Semple McPherson. And we also have a notorious real life cult leader in this. May Otis Blackburn, who really did have a crazy cult, and there were tons of crazy cults in LA in the 20s. And so it was fun to utilize that part of history too. So yeah, I probably went a little overboard on some of the research.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's such a thing as too much research. Do you guys?
Um, I don't. I think it's a fine line. I think it can't because you can really like get immersed in that, and then where do you begin with your storytelling? You can have this tremendous amount of research and go, which way do I go? What do I include? And then you have that feeling you have to include everything that you've learned about. So it's a fine balance. I think you need to do enough to get started and to kind of know your world, and then go from there. But that comes with, I think, knowing when you're ready for your story, listening for when your story is ready to go forward. So,
Absolutely.
um,
I think that's a perfect answer. You're absolutely, and again, this is why you guys have so many stories and such a long history of writing and so many awards. Like, this is why you guys win awards because you guys, exactly what you just said, you know when to actually start the story. You have the history, you have the background, and then you're like, okay, you know what? Now it's time to tell the story. So let's actually tap into, so I have what I call my stock questions and then my fun questions. So
all
let's
right.
do some stock questions, get those out of the way, and then let's have some fun with some of your characters and the process of writing. How about John? The question is for both of you, but we'll just start with John. So, did you know at a young age you wanted to be a writer, not necessarily horror or dark fiction, but a storyteller? Like, at what age did you realize, you know what? I think I would like to do this for a living.
I have a very distinct memory from first grade when we were given one of those assignments where they give you a photograph and say to write a story about it. And I was given a photograph of a guy climbing into a cockpit of a plane. And my story was a president was going in and he went and was zapping aliens out of the sky.
How
And when
cool
I
is
read
that?
this, two-paragraph little thing or whatever, afterwards, the other kids in the class were coming up to, I loved your story. That was so fun. And zap, 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 and everything. And right then and there, I had the bug. I was like, oh, I can write a story and people like me. Because previously I was very like introverted and, picked on and stuff. And then suddenly I was cool for 10 minutes, you know, after that. So I was like, oh, I love this. And I just loved the creativity and the imagination that, writing allowed for.
Sorry,
And it's
sorry, John.
never changed. Ever since then, that's it. I've been hooked.
Awesome. And that's why you're here. And this is why you do what you do. And Lisa, the same question applies to you. Did you know from a young age that you wanted to be a storyteller?
I had a kind of a weird thing. My first piece was published when I was 5. It was a poem that I wrote in kindergarten, and my teacher took it and sent it to the local creative writing magazine, and they published it. But I had this weird thing where I would score extraordinarily well on science tests. And so all of my counselors and parents and everything kept steering me into the sciences. But it wasn't until I was 15 and I saw this movie called The Exorcist that I said, oh, no, 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 no. This is what I want to do. I want to be able to affect readers or audiences like that movie did. And yes, my counselors and my parents were absolutely horrified when I showed up the next day and said, no, no, writing. That's got to be writing. So it's been pretty much nonstop from the age I was 15.
So, John, do you still have that photograph? Do you still have that story?
I don't have the photograph, but the story is my mom does still have it somewhere in her records in her storage unit. I saw it about 10 years ago, and I thought I had a picture of it, but it still exists. Yeah.
That's crazy. And Lisa, do you still have that poem? Or do you have a record of that poem?
I'm truthfully not sure. I've got a box of old stuff out in the garage, and the creative writing magazine that published it might be in there.
What would your younger self say? Would they just be so proud of, obviously they should be proud of you, but would they just be like, hell yeah, you did it, or look at you? Like, what do you think compared to where you were then? What would your 5-year-old self say, Lisa?
My 5-year-old self would probably say, "Oh, Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, among my other things that I do is I've become one of the world's leading experts on Halloween. And, what 5-year-old growing up in the 60s in LA didn't love Halloween to pieces? So, you go to me at 5 and go, hey, you're going to wind up as one of the world's leading experts on Halloween. And it would have been, I'm sure.
That's that's awesome. I actually do have Halloween questions, so that's going to lead into the next one. What about you, John? What would your first grade self say?
Probably, if they read the stuff that I'm writing now, it would be like, what happened to you between now and then? Because wow, this is some wacky stuff.
That's
Um,
awesome.
because when I was 5, it wasn't horror. It was we were knee deep in Star Wars and Star Trek in my house, and so it wasn't until Alien came out a few years later that the horror came into my creative kind of soul. But yeah, my 5-year-old self would be like, I don't know who you are. You're dark.
That's awesome because I have in my notes. So I apologize if you guys see me looking down this because I'm looking at my notes. I want to make sure that I ask you guys the questions. But I do have like, what is your favorite childhood Halloween memory? What is your favorite childhood memory from Halloween specifically?
Um, for me, it was Devil's Night. On the East Coast, I think what do they call it out here, or if they still do it, but we call it the Devil's Night the night before Halloween. And that was really the crazy, wild night, um, where we'd go out and wreak havoc and, throw toilet paper in trees and do crazy things like that. But for me, I didn't do stuff like that. One year we built a dummy out of, I had the Tom Savini book, Grand Illusions, and in there he built this dummy out of wood and foam. So we built this dummy guy and we put blood packs in it. And around the corner from my house, there was a large cliff with a road, and we threw this thing over the cliff, and it landed on the front of a 18-wheeler's cab, and the guy screamed, and there's blood all over the window and everything, and it was great for about 20 minutes until the police came and pulled us all by our ears back home and said you could have killed somebody. You're lucky you didn't do anything, and but it was really fun while it lasted. And for me, that was kind of like one of my big Halloween moments. Like, when you talk about kids having power and having, purchase over their lives and stuff, that was like a great moment. Like we scared the hell out of somebody. It was great. And did you hear that guy scream? It was great. And so that for me was a pretty formidable, but also a very big life lesson that you have to choose that very wisely because yes, we could have killed that guy, or we could have killed ourselves falling over the mountain, or any number of
Abs
terrible things could have happened. So we got really lucky.
yeah, yeah.
But
Oh my gosh. What about you, Lisa? What is a favorite childhood Halloween memory for you?
Mine is probably when I was in, I think, first or second grade. There was a television show that was big at the time called It's About Time, and it was about these astronauts who traveled back in time and lived with cave people. And I wanted to be a cave woman that year. And my dad was a crazy hunter, even though I grew up here in LA. And we always had weird stuff like actual honest to goodness deer skins around our house. And so my dad and my mom made me this insanely authentic cave woman outfit out of an actual deer hide. And I even had little booties made out of deer hide. And the only thing that was missing in this costume was I was so small, and I was a really small little kid that I could not carry an authentic wooden club. So I had to settle for a plastic wooden club. But I remember being so happy when I wore that to school because we would wear the costumes to school and then have a lunchtime pageant where all the kids would like parade around the playground in their costumes. And I felt so fun wearing that authentic costume around school that day.
That's pretty. You guys have like, okay, so those two memories, like those, have you written about either of those two stories? Because John, your story sounds amazing and scary. And yes, it's a good thing you didn't hurt it yourselves or the driver. And then Lisa, like that, I mean, both of those sound like awesome. You could turn that either into a novella or a short story or some flash. Like, have you guys written about that Halloween experience you just described?
I think John's would make a much better story. Mine is something that I can like pull out for the inevitable Halloween interviews I do every year. But in terms of fiction, I don't know.
What if it was what if there was magic associated with the deer skin?
That's certainly possible, I suppose.
Or you can take it to a spooky level. Obviously you wouldn't want a 5-year-old to, go out killing or anything, but I mean, in a way, that would be kind of scary, I guess.
Yeah.
What about you, John? Have you written about the body that you made that you threw over the cliff?
I haven't, but I probably should. Now that you mention it. Um, I did write about Devil's Night a few times and but and try to capture that feeling that we had with Devil's Night, but I used cats going after a bad guy instead. So I tried to make it more positive because, cats killing bad guys is always good in my book. So
Ab Absolutely, absolutely.
they have
Um,
our backs, whether, you know, we know it or not. I'm tired of I'm on a good PR campaign for cats because everybody thinks they're these cold, cruel things that all they're good for is, bouncing things off the ledges and stuff. And that is not true because every cat I've ever had has had my back in an amazing way. And they're wicked bright and they will. Anyway, that's my soapbox about cats for now.
no, please, please, because so I actually have in here that Lisa rescues cats and you have a garden. So I actually do have in here in regard to cats and hobbies. So if we want to, we can go ahead and tap into cats right now.
All right.
Yeah, I have a backyard right now full of feral kittens. We live up in the hills now, kind of in the northern part of the San Fernando Valley. My backyard is a little bit wild there. It's like a critter superhighway back there. And one of the things that we've had going through for the last year or so was a beautiful little feral female cat. And about 2 months ago, I suddenly saw four little adorable feral kittens, and one of them got tangled up in my grape trellis, and I had to go back and do surgery and cut it out and so forth. And anyways, I'm very lucky to have some friends who do animal rescue who helped me get the mama cat trapped and spayed and back into the backyard. And so now we have the four kittens in a gigantic pen back there that's like a cat condo. It's 4 stories tall, and they're getting a little bit bigger and they're adorable. And the trick with these is to get them used to people because they are feral. And so, every day it's reaching in a little bit more to touch them and pet them and talk to them. And it is working. And so I hope to have these little kittens ready to adopt out very soon and get them all set up with their forever homes.
Oh, that's lovely. And I'm right there with both of you. Cats have always, it was my first pet, and so it had a special place in my heart. And we just lost our 23-year-old three-legged cat earlier this year. And I said, that's it. I'm never getting no more pets. My heart can't take it. Like, I'm not. And my partner, she was just so devastated because she actually had him the whole 23 years. I was in there for 5, but she had him her whole life. We got a kitten, and so we just had our 3-month gotcha day yesterday. And he is chaos and love and light. And so I know I said I never wanted another cat again because I didn't want to have to go through that, but I couldn't imagine our lives without him right now because I know the house would be very different. It would be very sad and it would be very heavy and very quiet. He is chaos agent. I hear you. I support all things with cats, 100%.
And 23 is amazing, by the way. I salute you on that. I've got 2 indoor senior cats right now, and the oldest is 17. So, I would love to see her make 23, but
I love kittens, I love cats, like, and I love animals in general. Lizard people, I'd have to, I don't know. Actually, yeah, I say lizards would be cool with lizards if they were snakes. That's different. I'm not really a fan of snakes. So when you're out in your garden, like, I see your pictures, I'm like terrified. I'm like, lizards cool, spiders, scorpions, snakes, no. Like, please don't show me any of those things. I don't want to see that.
fortunately, I don't have any of those things aside from very small little spiders. We've never had scorpions. We don't get those up here, and I'm actually kind of surprised I've never seen a snake here. What we get all the time we have a raccoon family, we have opossums going through like crazy. We'll see coyotes in the streets. Fortunately, they can't get into my backyard. And the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my backyard, and I've only seen this once, was a great horned owl.
Mm.
And you better believe my heart was in my throat when I saw this thing that is like this big sitting in my backyard. And of course, I'm thinking, oh my God, the cats are inside, right? It was gorgeous and magnificent and absolutely terrifying.
Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. So, would you say this question is for both of you? Since we are talking about the cats, we'll just go ahead and tap into this. Would you say for you, John, as a musician, and
Mm.
then for you, Lisa, in regard to like gardening, would you say that this is how you recharge, or that these hobbies away from like the horror industry and the horror community and coming up with these crazy, sick, disturbing ideas, would you say that that is how you recharge and reset yourself to create those awesome, twisted stories?
Yeah, for me, playing music, it works in concert with my writing in a big way. Um, I actually, a lot of my stories, I have done scores for them and done songs for them and music for them. For my first novel, Nerves, I wrote like and recorded like 6 songs that were in the book that, because I had to do that because they were vital to the story. For my next book, Requiem, I actually wrote the Requiem that's played in the book, and there's 2 versions of it. And so I wrote both of them because I needed to have that. But more importantly, when I hit a creative wall or something, I will pick up a musical instrument, guitar or keyboard, and I will play something, and that helps my brain lower a lot of the daily noise. Because there's so much coming at you with day jobs and with the internet and everything now. So for me, it's kind of like a meditative process, kind of doing that. So definitely they work for me hand in hand. Absolutely.
Very cool. And Lisa, is gardening how you like reset, or is there something else that you do to like reset and recharge between stories?
I Gardening is part of it, but I think the thing that recharges me the most is I'm so lucky to have a day job that I love. I've been a bookseller on and off my whole life. I love being a bookseller. I always laugh whenever people say to me, so if you get that big book deal, you're going to quit, right? It's like, no, I could have quit long ago, actually. I love it. And I have tried doing the thing where you sit at home and all you do is write, and it did not work for me. I need to be around all of the people and the structure and so forth of our bookstore, and it's my extended family, and so I am far more productive when I have had a great day at my day job.
That's awesome. So, music. Do you listen to music while you're writing, or do you have to have silence? And if you do listen to music, what do you listen to? Let's start with you, John.
Um, I can only listen to instrumental music. I cannot listen to songs because it takes me out of the story. And then my dialogue starts like, it just messes me up. And even that, I don't even really usually do too much instrumental music when I'm writing. I usually just have whatever's going on in the world, which is weird because I am a music guy, but for me, no. Generally, no, I don't use music. Yeah.
What about you, Lisa? Do you listen to music while you're writing?
Sometimes, yeah, I love soundtracks. As John mentioned, I can't listen to anything that's got lyrics while I'm trying to write, but I love horror soundtracks, and I've got a lot of those loaded onto my computer. And yeah, sometimes I will put those on, or sometimes I'll tell Alexa to run something like a deep chill lounge station, because that kind of helps get me into the groove a little bit.
Absolutely. I love that you guys both say that because there has to be something about that. I'm the same way. I can't have, even when I was in school writing, I had to have no lyrics, or if there were lyrics, it had to be in a foreign language because I didn't understand what I was listening to. So I had to write like a 20-page paper or something like that, and I'm listening to, I don't know, Swedish folk music of some sort, and it's just like this odd chanting in the background. I'm like, yeah, that works for me.
Yeah.
So this applies to both of you. All of these questions will apply to both of you. This is never going to be like this question is only for you, John. Have you ever written something and you thought to yourself, what is wrong with me? And is that too much? Like, where did this come from? Have you ever written anything like that? Do you have something, whether it's published or not? But have you ever thought to yourself, what is wrong with me?
Yes. And in fact, I think when you are writing something and you end up with that, oh, this is really, really dark. And as soon as you start to think that and question it, is when you know it has to stay in. Because if it bothers you, it's going to bother other people. So yeah, if you can reach that point, as a horror writer, I think that's great if you can get there.
What about you, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa nailed it. I think that that's gold. When you've opened up that way, you've got that channel going, then you're writing, then you're telling a story. You need to go there. I think you need to go there to affect people. So yeah, what she said, 1,000%.
So now that we've talked about your music, we've talked about being disturbed, and that's what you want to do, that's what you like to do. When you're writing and listening to your instrumental music or soundtracks, what do you drink? I call it my writing juice, whatever you want. What fuels your stories? Do you drink coffee, tea, energy drinks? Lisa, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
I'm a tea drinker and I'm a bit of a tea snob. I have to have a really good tea. So yeah, in the mornings, I will drink a really good oolong. That's my favorite. And that helps fuel me. But if I am working in the evening, I sometimes will go for a little bit of an alcohol thing, which kind of gets me into the groove as well. So.
What alcohol? Gin, whiskey, vodka?
I kind of go in weird little streaks where I develop a favorite thing for a while. Lately it's been a really smoky, peaty whiskey.
Nice, nice. What about you, John? What is your writing juice?
Well, I do an iced coffee in the morning, plain black. Um, and then I'm a tea drinker like Lisa. I'm not as, as well versed as she is, but I love tea. I have a couple of teas throughout the day. And yeah, that's usually I don't drink liquor when I write because I usually get very sleepy very quickly and then it's game over. I learned that the hard way, especially at night. So I have a different metabolism in that way. But yeah, that's a tea drinker. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So now, if you were going to drink tea in the evening, do you decide to go with like an herbal non-caffeinated tea?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Like I usually will do a green tea, later at night, which I really like. And
totally.
then also kind of starts transitioning to sleep mode, theoretically.
Right? I know I have to look at the clock. Like yesterday, I think it was 2:30, and I decided to have like half a cup of coffee. And I was like, should I really do that? Should I really have half a cup of coffee at 2:30 in the afternoon? Because I don't know. And I was very excited. So this is why I decided I wasn't or was or wasn't going to have coffee. Is I knew I was excited to talk with both of you. And so I was afraid, I'm like, am I going to even be able to sleep tonight? I was like, should I really have that coffee? I did. And I was up from 2 to 3 thinking of stories and questions to ask you
Yeah.
both. So I did it. I had to. I had to. It was coffee.
Well, you're
Uh,
allowed, right? It's one of the joys of life when you can do that, right?
exactly. All right. I have a few more questions that I would love to ask you guys. And let's start with Bram Stoker Awards, because both of you have won quite a few Bram Stoker Awards. Being that your little 5-year-old selves didn't really know that that was going to be the direction you would be going this far down the line. Let's talk about the Bram Stoker Awards. Like, what was that like? How did that feel? Like, what help me understand what it felt like to win a Bram Stoker the very first time that either of you, whoever wants to start, John, what did it feel like? How was that for you?
Wow. Well, I had a very surreal experience in Las Vegas. I was at a table with Tony Timpone from Fangoria. R.L. Stein was to my right, and Ann Sterling, Rod Sterling's daughter, was to my left. So no pressure at all. Just the small talk was very, very challenge. I was really like nervous, like with these people around me. Um, and then when I won, it was really wild because I swear it seemed like the never ending, like huge vast area, and I saw these people that I've known for years. Like I remember Weston Oakes looking at me and nodding, and Jack Ketchum, and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing up here? This is crazy." And it was presented to me by one of my heroes, Ellen Datlow, which was wild. And then later in the night, it was really strange because we were all out on the balcony, and I think it was somebody had ordered pizza, and Jason Brock said, "Hey, why don't you have a piece of pizza?" And I opened it, and there's all these bugs came out, and it was so weird and creepy. I was like, "This is like the weirdest night of my life." It was so weird. So it was very. And then when I went back to my hotel room, I could hear Olivia Newton-John was singing. Um, and it was, I listened to like almost the whole concert. Like this is like the weirdest, strangest night of my life. It didn't seem real. It seemed like one of those weird dreams. Like, I was sitting next to Earl Stein, and I won an award, and then Olivia Newton-John was singing, and I had pizza, but there were bugs crawling all over. It was like weird, but amazing still. Probably very appropriate though, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. What about you, Lisa? The first time you won a Bram Stoker, what was it like? How was that? How did that feel?
The nomination was way weirder to me than the award. At the time, I was heavily involved already behind the scenes with HWA, and I was not president yet, but I forget exactly what I was doing at the time. But um, I remember a fellow at that time named Mark Worthern was the official vote counter and so forth, and he is sadly gone now, but he was a wonderful guy, and he actually called me. He probably shouldn't have done it, but he called me at work and said, "Hey, congratulations." And I'm like, "For what?" And he says, "Well, you were just nominated." And I think we were about to release the nominees anyways, but I actually said to him, "Oh, Mark, you've got to recount. That can't be right." So I was absolutely flabbergasted and completely stunned and in disbelief, delighted disbelief, of course. But I really did say, "Hey, please go recount that there's something very wrong there."
Can I just say that you guys are like so adorable? Like my cheeks are hurting from like hearing those stories because, like I said, it was I felt like in all of the things that I've ever done, I've never really felt like I've had imposter syndrome, with one exception. Because, for the most part, I feel like I've prepared myself for, what I did in my life, military, corporate, things of that nature, academia. But when I joined the Horror Writers Association, I had no horror writing experience. All I knew was I loved horror. And I was like, well, if that's good enough for them to join, then so be it. So that's the only time I ever felt like I had imposter syndrome, was meeting John at the booth in 2017. And you were so sweet and so kind, and you were like, it's okay. Like we're all here to support each other, whichever way we can. And check this out, you guys. Okay, I hope you can see this. There it is. This is all that is left of the bookmark from that day. I cut it, and that's what covers my camera. I literally have just this little sliver of Horror Writers Association. So this is from 2017. This has been with me since 2017. So I feel like I have officially crossed over, and that's why I'm like, okay, it only took me so many years to get to this point where I don't feel like I'm an imposter anymore. I am a horror fan, and I'm talking with you guys. I've actually written horror stuff. I've published. So I actually have a post-it note. Another thing that I was doing last night at 2 a.m. was I was writing my story, and I didn't want to forget what I was writing. And so I kept myself awake. So my question to you is this: have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and you're like, do I stay up and write, or do I just jot down this idea?
Well, as you age, you are far too young to know this yet, fortunately for you, but your sleep changes. I, at this point, am lucky if I get 5 hours of sleep in a night. And so, yes, there's lots of that. You wake up at like 4 in the morning, and you kind of lay there thinking, "Oh God, it's 4. It's way too early. Should I just get up?" And I do find myself entertaining myself with stories. So I will be laying there at like 4:30 in the morning going, "Oh, that's actually pretty good," and working through things. I've always been a writer who worked through things in my head extensively first. I will actually just think on a short story for weeks before I sit down and write a single word. So yeah, when you wake up in the middle of the night with your elderly sleep patterns all messed up. Yes, that's one of the things I will do.
What about you, John? If
I,
inspiration hits you in the middle of the night, what do you do?
I get up and deal with it. And Lisa, I'm right there with you with the sleep going down and down and down. And my dad was an insomniac, and I've inherited that. And I think I'm on the ancient sleep schedule. I forget what they used to call it, but before the Industrial Revolution, people would sleep. They'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning for 2 hours, and they would actually go out and meet in their streets and everything, or have food or something, and then go back to sleep again for a couple more hours. And I'm kind of like that. I'll wake up most nights. I wake up around 3 o'clock for an hour or two, and I instead of just like I used to lay there, just stare and try to go back to sleep. Now I get up and I do work, and I usually always have some kind of an idea or a dream or something that I'll transcribe and work on or get some writing done. It's a great time because everything is quiet. There's no noise. It's a great time, and it's cool to be up and nobody's up, and anyway. But yeah, I use it, and thank God, if you are somewhere where you're not, you don't want to get out of bed. I mean, you can write on your phone now very easily. There's so many ways. I mean, we used to have like the little notebooks we'd keep by the bed with a flashlight. I'd do that for years. But yeah, it's highly recommended. Just use the time, use it. That's creative gold.
That's awesome. So, are both of you can are you the type that you have to do longhand or do you write on your computer? Like, what is your writing process? Like, how do you sit down every single day and you say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words today? Like, what is your writing process?
I almost cannot write longhand anymore. It's embarrassing. I mean, I if I have to like write anything longhand, I my spelling and everything is way worse than when I type. I've just become a total typist. So, I often, my among the many things the pandemic messed up was my writing schedule because of my work schedule. My job at the bookstore, I my hours used to be 10 to 6, and with the pandemic, they shifted because we had to downsize our staff and a lot of things changed. My hours are now 11 to 7, which I used to be a night writer. I used to come home, sit down at 6. I'd get home by 6:30. I'd sit down, I'd get a couple of hours in, and everything was great. Well, now by the time I get home, it's evening. I've got somebody here who wants to have dinner and watch a movie or whatever, and then I'm tired and so I'm now a morning writer, which I'm still getting used to 4 years later. And so I've never been one of those people who has to achieve a certain thing every day. If my writing time ends up going to research, that's fine. If I end up getting 2,000 words in a day, great. If I end up having to spend it all on the boring business angle of it, which you do. Unfortunately, the more success you have as a writer, the more time is going to have to go to things like contracts and edits and looking at proofs and galleys and dealing with your agent and keeping track of payments and social media and just all of that stuff. So sometimes that's what my writing morning goes to. So I mean, overall, I seem to stay productive enough to keep things in the pipeline, so it's working, I guess.
What about you, John? What is your writing process? What does that look like? What is your writing day, word count, things of that nature? How does that look for you?
Well, I usually don't have something steady that I can count on every day because I have a couple of different jobs, and things are popping up, and I have meets and Zooms at different times during the day. But one thing I got in the habit of many years ago is writing in the morning before anything starts. And I do it by a minute thing, not by word count. And I'll say, if I have 5 minutes, I can get half a page down, which doesn't seem a lot, but after a week, you've got a couple of pages. And I think that's a really important kind of habit to make. I try not to be a word count person until I'm submitting things, because I think that, writing to a word count, I don't write as well, I don't think. But if I need to write for 5 minutes, or I have 10 minutes and I'm just writing and I let come out. If that's all I have, that's all I have. And then my day, I feel good. Like if the noise of the day gets me, at least I've had that. But also, you can use time to your advantage. Instead of just standing in line at a grocery store, instead of sending texts or going on Facebook, take 5 minutes of your lunch break to write. 10 minutes, whatever you have. it's really tempting to do those things. You get that immediate gratification. I saw Neil Gaiman said in a speech last year that I was at that he wrote Coraline like that. He had just had a child and he had no time, and he had 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the night. And he said, if I write one sentence a night, I'll, whatever it takes. And he wrote Coraline over a year. And I thought, man, if he wrote Coraline in a year like that, none of us have excuses. So you could find the time if you want. And one thing Lisa told me very early on when I met her is turn off the dang TV. If you want to be a writer, don't watch TV. You could take that time. Everyone seems to have time to catch up on the new X-Files or whatever, right? But back then, but nobody ever says I don't have time to write. Well, so don't watch X-Files, or write for half an hour and then watch it. And I think if you get into that habit and you treat it as kind of like a self-care kind of a thing and a self-meditation thing, and you say, this is my time, I need this, then I think that's a really good method. And that's what I use.
I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm kind of the same way. I believe like for me, I'm most productive in the morning. I used to be like you, Lisa, because of my schedule. When I was in the Air Force, I was on swing shift. And so I would be coming home at 11 o'clock at night. And, I'm like, well, I'm like, I don't want to go to sleep right now. I know it's 11, but I'm like, I'm awake. I need at least a couple hours to wind down. And so I would write at 11, from like 11 to 2, and then go to sleep because I didn't have to wake up and I didn't have to go to work until 3 o'clock the next day. And so, I just kind of switched that writing clock. But now obviously I'm on a more normal circadian rhythm. And but I do believe, like you, John, that writing in the morning before doing anything is very rewarding. And it's you can either do it, journaling. I used to journal like when I had just become a widow. That's what I would do in the morning. I would write. Writing is so powerful. It's cathartic. And it can be disturbing because you can come up with these crazy ideas, right? The horror stories, the lizard people for taking an urban legend and then turning it into something creatively powerful. So the beauty of writing is just it's magical. It really is.
Yeah, I've always thought it's a form of magic. I mean, it's telepathy, it seems impossible. You're putting thoughts onto a screen or a piece of paper, and someone else can take those thoughts now and make them their own. So, yeah, it's absolutely a magic practice.
I love it. So I thank you for being magicians. Now you guys are not just writers, you're magicians.
Yeah, and I think that's really true. I mean, if you read in older texts, like if you read Matthew Lewis's The Monk or something, and you think about I'm in this person's brain that lived, a few hundred years ago, and how those emotions are still real and living inside you, it's an unbelievable like thing. It does feel like a magic thing.
Writing is magic. So, what are you currently reading that is transporting you into another world? Lisa, what are you currently reading, if you're reading anything?
I am reading something for research. I am not gonna tell you what it is, but the last thing that I read that I really loved, and unfortunately it's not out yet. I do a lot of blurbing, but Sarah Reed has an absolutely fantastic novel coming out soon from Bad Hand Books called The Atropine Tree. And I read that and I loved it. It's it's an odd mishmash of gothic horror and body horror and alchemy and ghost, and it's really good. So that was the last thing that I read that was not research that I thought was fantastic.
Very cool. What about you, John? Are you currently reading, or same thing? Have you just finished something that just blew your brain?
Well, I'll admit that I am not a monogamous reader. I read several things at once all the time. I love reading. I love books. It's terrible. It's a terrible addiction. But I love it. But what I'm really reading right now that I'm loving is Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House. And I just love her use of language. I love that it's kind of like Harry Potter, but it's more female oriented. It's really it's I love her writing, and I'm reading it slow because I love the writing in the world. And when I read fast, it usually means like it's it's not as affecting me as much, but yeah, I highly recommend her work. And like Lisa, I've got a lot of a lot of books on blurbing too that I wish I could say, but there's some great stuff. Great stuff. We're really in a great golden age of horror. There's so much great stuff coming out. It's
Right?
unbelievable the amount of really brilliant writers working today. It's so inspiring. And I think on a side note, when we were at StokerCon, seeing how it's grown, seeing how the new voices that have kind of risen, like even 5 years ago, we didn't have the diverse amount of people that we saw like this weekend. It was just so heartwarming to see, and all these voices getting recognized, and just it's amazing, amazing. So I wish I could live three lives to read everybody's work.
That's all. And thank you. That's actually, I wanted to end it with StokerCon, talking about StokerCon, because what a better way to talk about horror and the conglomeration of everybody coming together. So thank you for that perfect segue into StokerCon. So again, you just said it, how it started to where it is now. You guys have been there from its early days. So what are some of your do you have some favorite memories from like the early Stoker cons, and then like you said, the trajectory to where it is now today? Like did you ever believe that you would be sitting in a room or standing in a room with all of those people that you just were hanging out with? Like, what?
I did. I'd like to start this off because I had a side kind of seat to the origins, and I'll never forget. We were riding in a van. I don't know where we were. At least I think we might have been. I don't know, but you and Rocky told me about the idea for StokerCon, and I was just so blown away. Like, oh man! And it's something that the organization had dreamt of for a very long time, and seeing how it's grown from maybe 200, 300 people. And then just now, I don't know what we had this time, 700, 800 people has been unbelievable. And did I believe in it? Yes, because of Lisa. And I've seen what she has done with the entire horror genre. When I first met Lisa, I know you're here, but um, one of the big things that she told me was there's no women in these anthologies. And there weren't a lot of women horror writers. It was like Lisa and Nancy Holder and Nancy Kilpatrick. There wasn't a lot. And Lisa really was on the forefront and took a lot of heat, online from people for pushing for female horror authors to get more recognition and get into these books and to get into positions of power. So I always believed that if anybody was going to pull off a StokerCon and make it grow and make it diverse and make it what it could be, it would be her. So now I'll pass the talking stick to you, Lisa.
You are too kind, John, as always. I'm glad you brought up Rocky, who really is someone that we need to mention whenever we talk about the history of HWA and StokerCon, because Rocky stepped in as president, and I think it was 2012, maybe even earlier. And he was just remarkable in turning the organization around. I was his vice president, and I saw some of the things he did behind the scene. And then I think it was about 2013 when people started seeing the changes, the great stuff that was happening to HWA under his administration, and saying, why don't we just have our own convention? And we started thinking more seriously about that. And we would look at other horror conventions, and we realized that it seemed like there was a whole gap to be filled in terms of providing horror writers with something that would let them advance their business and their education and their skills, and just be around their peers in a really a way that promoted camaraderie and sharing and so forth. And so we started really seriously talking about that. And by, I think, the end of 2014, we had signed our first hotel deal we had trademarked StokerCon. We were starting to design how we wanted it to work. And then sadly, Rocky passed away at the end of 2014. I will never forget the date. It was December 1st. And I had to step in and take over as the president, and it was absolutely mortifying. And I was also in the middle of huge life changes in other situations too, moving in to take care of my mother who suffered from severe dementia. We were buying a house and moving two households, and it was just a crazy time. But it turned out to be very, very gratifying. It was a tough few years. I ended up being the president for 4.5 years before, thank God, John said, I think I'd like to try this. And I said, great, here you go. And my goal when I stepped into the role of president, there were two major goals. One was more diversity for women, for writers of color, for disabled writers, LGBTQ writers. And the other was education, because I felt like we had just started to give scholarships at the time, and I felt like we could do even more with that and educate people more and more about how magnificent this genre is, and create the next generations of writers through offering more educational opportunities. And it all seems to have kind of worked. So when I go to something like this last week's StokerCon, and as John was saying, you see this absolutely magnificent group of writers who many of whom are young and who are the kind of writers that I wanted to see when I was working on all of this 10 years ago. And it's tremendously gratifying.
That is so cool. It's thank you both for sharing your stories, because I too I went to the Queen Mary, so I was literally 1 month into my life as a widow, and what did that mean for me? So I had just become a member of the HWA, and I was just a mess. My life, so I relate to you, Lisa. My life was a mess, but yet I went with my best friend. I bought tickets, and she joined me, and I met my tribe, and I met the most amazing people. And something that was my life was so horrible, but I had an amazing day. It was the best day. I got to meet my professor, my horror professor, who introduced me to the HWA, and the professor that he introduced us to. We interviewed him, Michael Arnzen, and he signed. I brought my textbooks, and he signed my textbooks, and so, like I said, it was the worst experience of my life at the time, but it was the best damn day ever, and I will never forget. Like, that StokerCon, to me, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to another StokerCon. I know I should, but that was just, like you were saying, John, like in Vegas, like there was something that was just like the best day ever. And I still have photos of that day. And it still makes me laugh so hard when I look at those pictures. And I think, thank you for this community. Like, I literally just, all I kept feeling was I just felt so at ease and so comfortable and welcomed. That was the best way to describe it. I just felt welcomed. At the lowest point of my life, I felt amazing. So kudos to the Horror Writers Association. So I don't know if we should just stop talking at this point. Like, that's it. Like, we're done. No, I've got a few more questions for you. So I'm going to ask you, favorite Halloween candy. If you could be a Halloween candy, what Halloween candy would you be? John, I'm going to start with you. What would be what Halloween candy are you?
Candy corn.
I'm going with the candy corn's close cousin, the mellow cream pumpkins.
You guys are okay, those are the most punk rock candies, because you got your Reese's, it's all smooth and creamy and peanut buttery, but both of you just nailed the two most punk rock candy. It's to quote my friend Richard, it's the fuck you candy.
Appropriate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you guys want to have any final thoughts on Placerita and like book signings? Like, when does it come out? Will you be doing any signings? What can we look forward to next from you guys regarding your brand new baby, your book baby, about the lizard people?
I don't think we have any official signings lined up for it. I know it's coming out Friday, June 14th. It should be available. And me and Lisa will be at many events, so feel free to bring a copy to those. I know we're always at events, and we have signings coming up throughout the year. I know, Lisa, you've already got some signings booked up for other projects coming in the fall, so bring your Placerita and have her sign it. And also, I do want to mention, if you see Lynn Hansen, have her sign it too. She really delivered a knockout cover too. So very cool. In the age of, AI, she actually painted the cover. So it's really a treat. So
I almost thought about trying to get Lynn onto this podcast because she's staying with me right now in her travels. She is out today enjoying like Porto's Bakery and the Carter Sexton Art Store very appropriately. But yeah, I will be a guest of honor at the upcoming Midsummer Scream, which is an incredible Halloween and horror convention in Long Beach at the end of midsummer, at the end of July rather. And I'm happy to sign there. I will also be doing signings later this year at Dark Delicacies for a couple of different things. So you can always track me down anytime, and I will be happy to scribble in your book.
So on that note, I have one final thing that I need to ask from you. My tagline is go forth and be magical.
here, why don't we each do it solo and then we'll do it together. Go forth and be magical.
Go forth and be magical.